आजचे प्रमुख वक्ता जॉन कुरियन यांना मी विनंती करतो, कृपया आपण विचारपीठावर यावे.
आत्ताचं हे सत्र जॉन कुरियन सरांचं आहे. मी आत्ता तुम्हाला थोडक्यात त्यांची ओळख करून देते. जी त्यांनी लिहून दिली होती ती ओळख करून देते. त्याच्या पलीकडे त्यांची माहिती खूप आहे. MA आणि PhD USA झालं आहे. शिक्षणशास्त्र हा विषय 1976 ते 83 TISS मुंबई इथे ते प्राध्यापक होते. 1983 त्यांनी सेंटर फॉर लर्निंग रिसोर्सेसची स्थापना केली. संचालक आहेत ते त्याचे. त्यांचे जे महत्त्वाचे प्रकाशित झालेले संशोधन प्रकल्प आहेत त्यातले काही मी या ठिकाणी सांगते आहे. लिव्हिंग कंडिशन्स ऑफ कॉलेज अँड युनिव्हर्सिटी हॉस्टेल्स इन इंडिया, रिपोर्ट फॉर वर्ल्ड बँक एज्युकेशन ऑफ रूरल गर्ल्स अँड विमेन इन इंडिया, एलिमेंटरी एज्युकेशन इन इंडिया myths, reality and alternative, lifting Muslims from bottom of the development and education ladder, a transformative agenda for the 21st century. हा आत्ता अलीकडचा त्यांचा संशोधन प्रकल्प आहे. CLRच्या बाबत थोडंसं सांगायला हवं. CLR ही सेंटर फॉर लर्निंग रिसोर्सेस हे जे आहे त्यामध्ये मला माहीत असलेले 2 प्रकल्प चालतात. त्यातला एक जो आहे तो त्यांनी वस्ती पातळीवरची मुलं ज्या शाळांमध्ये जातात त्या शाळांमधल्या त्या मुलांना इंग्रजी भाषा वापरण्यासाठी म्हणून ती इतरत्र बोलता येण्याचा एक जो कॉन्फिडन्स लागतो, जिथे गरज असते तिथे ती बोलायला मिळावं, या दृष्टीने एक अतिशय चांगला कार्यक्रम तयार केला. आणि वैशिष्ट्य त्याचं मला जे जाणवलं ते असं आहे की त्याच्या 3 पातळ्या त्यांनी ठरवलेल्या होत्या. त्यामध्ये काही रेकॉर्ड्स आहेत छोटी छोटी 15-15 मिनटाची ऐकायला, आणि त्यावर छोटंसं काम असतं. हे ऐकणं, बोलणं आणि त्यातून त्यानंतर लिहिणं, तर लिहिण्यासाठीच्या वर्कशीट्स पण ते त्यात अवेलेबल करून देतात. आणि एक एक पातळी आहे. पहिली पातळी शिकून घेतल्यावर दुसरी पातळी, तिसरी पातळी, आणि त्यानंतर 18 वर्षापर्यंतची जी मुलं आहेत त्यांना एक मोठा कार्यक्रम आहे त्यांनी ठरवलेला. हे 3 कोर्सेस झालेले असतील तर तो कार्यक्रम समजून घ्यायचा त्यांच्याकडे जाऊन एक दिवस, आणि त्यानंतर तो वर्षभर आपण आपल्या ठिकाणी रोज सराव करून आत्मसात करायचा. त्याचा उपयोग खूप झाला आहे. मी स्वतः अनेक शाळांमध्ये वसईतसुद्धा त्याची ओळख करून दिली होती, आणि आम्हाला त्या शिक्षकांनी, मुलांनी तिथल्या हे सांगितलं होतं की याचा फार उपयोग होतो. हे जास्तीत जास्त ठिकाणी जिथे जिथे प्रश्न आहे तिथे तिथे हे इंट्रोड्यूस व्हायला पाहिजे. तर ती एक फार मोठी मदत मराठी माध्यमाच्या मुलांना, आणि मला वाटतं प्रादेशिक कोणत्याही भाषेतल्या मुलांना होऊ शकते त्यांच्या त्या प्रोग्रॅमची. तर तो एक भाग होता. आणि त्याशिवाय पालक माता ज्या असतात त्यांनासुद्धा शिक्षणाबद्दलची एक जागरूकता यावी यासाठीचेही कार्यक्रम हे त्यांच्यामार्फत राबवले जातात. त्यामुळे हे सगळं त्यांच्याबद्दलचं फार औपचारिक आहे. पण त्या पलीकडे जाऊन त्यांनी मुस्लिम समाजाच्या शिक्षणातल्या विविध प्रश्नांवर वेळोवेळी लिहिलेलं आहे. माझ्याकडे त्यांचे सगळे लिहिलेले आर्टिकल्स हे उपलब्ध आहेत. आणि यानंतरच्या 2 दिवसानंतरच्या काळामध्ये त्यांचं काम किंवा शाबान सरांचं काम किंवा रानू मॅडमचं जे काही या अशा पद्धतीचं काम आहे ते सगळं आपण त्यांच्याकडनं जे ते देऊ शकतील ते सगळं घेऊया, आणि ते आपण सगळ्यांनी वाचून समजून घेण्याची गरज आहे. आज आत्ता कुरियन सरांचा जो विषय आहे तो आहे मुस्लिम समाजाच्या शिक्षणापुढील आव्हाने. आता आपण बाह्य सगळ्या परिस्थितीतनं प्रत्यक्ष शिक्षणातल्या आव्हानांकडे येतो आहोत, आणि यानंतरची सगळी सत्र उद्या दुपारपर्यंतची त्याच दृष्टीनं असतील. तर मी त्यांचं इथे मनापासून स्वागत करते. ही शिक्षण परिषद व्हावी यासाठी त्यांनी माझ्याबरोबर खूप मदत केलेली आहे.
इला दलवाई स्वागत करताय त्यांचं. येस.
I'm sorry, I will be speaking in English most of the time because one of my great deficiencies is that I know three other languages, but I'm not able to speak fluently in any one of them. So I will speak slowly for those who don't understand English. Well, I'm happy to speak very slowly, and if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Incidentally, I am not a Muslim. I have not converted and changed my name to John Kurrien, but I have only very recently understood what the situation of Muslims were in this country. And I have spent 50 years in this country in the field of education, okay? Writing about education, teaching at the college level, training teachers, training trainers of teachers, in Maharashtra, in various other states of India. I have spoken in national, international, local meetings. And every time I talk about disadvantaged children or communities, I have always taught scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. That has been my understanding. Only 4 or 5 years ago, I read a report in the National Sample Survey, NSS, and I was surprised to find out that in terms of education, Muslims had the lowest enrollment. And I was so surprised that I immediately, at that time, the National Education Policy was being drafted. The 2020 policy was being drafted. And at that time, the draft was being formulated. So I was invited to contribute. And I wrote 3 recommendations, one of which was to treat Muslims as a disadvantage, lower, and having the lowest enrollment. And I'm glad to say, it's not important, that the draft National Education Policy 2020 included Muslims as the lowest in terms of enrollment, and there are 3 or 4 places where Muslims are mentioned in the draft. However, in the 2020 National Education Policy, Muslims are completely absent. I'll come to that later on, but Professor Shaban and Professor Jain will, I think, be talking about the National Education Policy in detail. So when I'm talking about Muslims, I am now think about them as a disadvantaged community. That is the way I look at Muslims entirely. I mean, that they happen to be have a religion also is a separate issue, and I'll deal with that later on. However, I am fundamentally looking at them as a disadvantaged community. So let me start. Muslims have the lowest education enrollment at the school level, whether it's at upper primary, that is classes 6 to 8, whether it is secondary, classes 9 to 10, or whether it's higher secondary, classes 11 to 12. They are far lower than, see, the important point here is, they are far lower than scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, okay, which are the traditionally disadvantaged groups in India. The second, in Navodaya Vidyalayas and Kendriya Vidyalayas, which are the prestigious secondary schools in our country, Muslims are even lower in enrollment, and scheduled castes and scheduled tribes have got a significant enrollment in Navodaya Vidyalayas and Kendriya Vidyalayas. When I say Muslims have the lowest enrollment, they have far lower than the 14.2% of their population. Okay, I mean, this is what I mean when they are. Next. In higher education, Muslims are by far the lowest in terms of enrollment, and only 2% of the higher education enrollment is Muslims are there. And you have to remember, as I said, 14% of the population is Muslims, and 2% of the enrollment is in higher education. And more important, the same percentage is there 2%, 1.9, is the enrollment in the in the institutions of national importance. That is IITs, IIMs, All India Medical Institute, National Institute of Design, Delhi University, Aligarh University. And given the numbers that may be in Aligarh, you can imagine how small the numbers are in the other institute, IITs, IIMs, etc. Third, don't. Now, in this extremely depressing situation, there is one silver lining. Up to now, if you go for any discussion, layman's discussion, is saying, why are Muslims so poorly enrolled in enrollment? Why are they disadvantaged? And one of the immediate answers, apart from poverty and all of that, one immediate answer is Muslim parents are very conservative, very orthodox, and they don't send their girls to school. Now, this is a very outdated 1950s to 1980 idea. All right? Now, in the last 7 or 8 years, if you study the enrollment, there are more Muslim girls than Muslim boys at upper primary, secondary, higher secondary, and in the last year in higher education. More Muslim girls than boys. So the important point is, why are Muslims low in enrollment has nothing to do with conservative parents. Disadvantaged parents, whether it's Muslims, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, Christians, you name it, are all interested that their children get education, girls or boys. There are other reasons for why girls are not sent to school or college, etc. If you look at the school, I've been giving you statistics. If you look at the school enrollment position of Muslims, many Muslims students do not complete class 8. And the vast majority do not get to standard 10, and only a small go beyond standard 10 to standard 12. So, and nearly all these children who do not complete class 8, class 10, class 12, even drop out early, and many do not even come to school, are disadvantaged Muslim students. And I will be focusing my entire discussion on Muslim disadvantaged students. That is, the poor and lower middle class Muslims. I am not talking of that. I'm not quite sure how much the percentage is. Is it 20 or is it 20% or 10% of the top of Muslims are middle class and upper middle class and rich. I am not talking about my friends, their children, grandchildren, okay? I am talking more about the Muslim poor and lower middle class, who I will refer to as disadvantaged. And that is the focus of my discussion. And it's these who are attending municipal corporation schools, Zilla Parished schools, Urdu medium schools, since the 1990s in a very big way, low-cost English medium schools. And now, incidentally, government is also starting English medium schools and madrasas. So where do these children, this 80% of children attend, they are attending these types of schools. So, what is the Next slide. Muslim students, and in these schools which I was referring to, Zilla Parished, Municipal Corporation, Urdu medium schools, etc., the learning quality is very poor. And so these are the studies which show what is the quality of learning of Muslim students. I am sure that many of you have read the Asar study, which comes out every year, which shows that more than 50% of class 5 children are unable to read a class 2 textbook. And class 8 children, the same percentage, are unable to do division, simple division, which is taught in class 3. And the Asar study refers to all rural children. So it includes all the rural Muslim children. But in 2004, the IHDS, the India Human Development Survey, did a study in which they looked at Muslim students. And the lowest levels of learning, the 6 to 14 age group, in reading, writing, and arithmetic were Muslims, along with scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The third study is Pratham. You may have all heard of Pratham. Pratham did a study almost a decade ago, a little earlier, on Mumbai Municipal Corporation schools. And in the Mumbai Municipal Corporation schools, more than 50% of the class 3 children were unable to read and write Urdu. These are Urdu medium schools. And the schools which did the worst in this study of the Mumbai Municipal Corporation schools were Urdu medium schools. They did far worse than Marathi medium schools and Hindi medium schools. Now, every parent, poor parent, whether it's Muslim or scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or Hindu or Christian, every poor and lower middle class parent aspires to send their children to English medium schools. And when you have parents who are, even if they are poor, willing to spend money, their low-cost English medium schools have come up in every village, town, city. You turn your back, you'll see an English medium school. And these are low-cost. I don't mean St. Vincent's or Loyola or any of those schools, okay? I mean low-cost English medium schools, which are there everywhere. And there's a lot of studies done on what children learn there. And what children learn there is extremely poor, because the teachers themselves don't know English. So the entire teaching is done in Hindi, Marathi, whichever the regional language is. And the entire teaching of English is done, people write on the blackboard, children are supposed to copy. And everybody is extremely happy when their children go home and say good morning, good afternoon, bye-bye, all of that. This is the thing. Now what has happened also is, because of this demand of parents for English medium, there is an extreme pressure which has been put on the state government. And politicians and administrators act only when there is pressure. And this pressure comes from the poor and lower middle class in a very big way. So despite the national education policy and anything, whatever people may say, governments all over the country have started English medium schools. All over the country. Now, in Kashmir, Nagaland and a few other countries, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, English medium has been there. In Kashmir, for instance, English medium has been there for almost 2 decades. English medium is the English is the medium of instruction in Kashmir. Surprising, but and I remember when they became that, it was in the middle of a conference, and I started a petition against it, but that's a separate issue, long time ago. Now, Asar has done a study of English medium things, and they show that in Kashmir, that half of class 8 children in Kashmir who study in English cannot read a class 2 level textbook. So, the question of English should be a big question mark, because Muslims have recently, in the last few decades, and everybody else, has seen English as the avenue of social mobility and as the avenue of progress. Please, I am not saying no to English medium, but English medium should be very qualified. Okay? I personally am a product of elite English medium schools. I'm a product of elite English medium colleges. But despite all of that, I can still say that this is not the medium of instruction that should be there for everybody, and I'm willing to defend this position with anybody. Next. So, what is the learning and education challenge for Muslims? As far as I'm concerned, we should focus on 12 years of quality education. Important. Quality education where children are learning. Not simply 12 years of quality education. Incidentally, that is the National Education Policy, the 2020 National Education Policy states that as the goal, but it also includes 3 years of pre-primary education. However, this 12 years of education should be focused entirely on disadvantaged Muslim students. And they compose, I have calculated, about 290 lakhs. That is 2.9 crores. Now, in India we talk of crores and lakhs, we talk about it without actually realizing how large the population is. And just this Muslim disadvantaged, poor and lower middle class student population is larger than the population of Australia. So when you are talking of trying to provide 12 years of quality education, this is a tremendously difficult and long task. And it's going to be difficult, and there should be no bones made about trying to provide 12 years of education with or without technology. That's a separate issue altogether, but it will be a difficult task. I think it'll have to be done with technology, definitely with technology, but technology has a role to play. Now, however, providing 12 years of education for disadvantaged Muslim students is not enough. If you want to do anything with Muslim communities, especially poor and lower middle class Muslim communities, then you have to focus not only on college, but you have to focus on school, but you have to focus on the years before school, you have to focus on the years after school. And if you focus, and the very important group to look at is the birth to 6 age group, which is 0 to 6 years, birth to 6 years, which composes again of 2 crores and 10 lakhs. Now, many of you may not know it, but because I belong to an educational center, 10 years ago, no more, 13 years, 15 years ago, we started work in the birth to 3 age group. That is, teaching parents how to bring up little infants. That is, the first 1,000 days is the most important days in the life and development of any human being. There's an economist, an Nobel Prize winning economist called Heckman. And Heckman says that these first 1,000 days, the first 3 years, is the most important stage of development. And in terms of rates of return, it is the highest rates of return come in at this level, and no other level, even school, college training, no other level can you get the kind of rates of return as to this level. Because it's this level which affects lifelong mental development, lifelong health, and we need to take care proper responsive parenting in this age group. Because in India, we have a terrible problem with dealing with children in this age group. We have the highest rates of malnutrition, stunting and wasting in the world. And Muslim children, incidentally, have, along with scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, 35%. This is the National Family NFHS surveys show that 35% of Muslim infants are stunted, along with scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. They are the worst of. And what does stunting mean? Stunting means that for your age, your height is smaller. And what does stunting do? It has extremely harmful consequences, because stunting has your mental ability goes down, school performance goes down in childhood, increased risk of nutrition-related diseases like diabetes and blood pressure. Incidentally, diabetes is a huge problem now in India, and hypertension, blood pressure. And what you do in birth to 3, what the inputs you provide has even or don't provide, has even an impact on adult wages. I was very surprised to read that, because that's a World Bank international study, not only looking at India, but looking at labor, rates of return to labor later on. So, then you have the children and youth in school and higher education, which is about 290 lakhs, 2.9 lakhs of disadvantaged Muslim children. I'm now not talking of all Muslim children, I'm talking of the 80% or more of Muslims who are disadvantaged. And that size of population in school and college, this thing, is the population of South Africa. Incidentally, it's larger than the population of South Africa. But the most neglected group, like the birth to 3 age group, is the Muslim youth or any youth outside the schools and colleges. We have an equal number of youth under 25 years outside schools and colleges than are within schools and colleges. But the entire nation and the entire nation's focus, the entire focus for decades, is simply on our schools and colleges. I'm not saying that we don't focus on the schools and colleges, but we must realize that there are so many outside schools and colleges to whom we hardly pay any attention. I mean, some attention is paid. And many of them are neither employed nor in training, and many of them are married already and probably having, I'm talking about youth under 25, and probably already started families. So, these are the groups which require not only skill training, which is very important, but also a lot of other things. For instance, a lot of just disadvantaged parents require how to be a good parent. Both men and women, how to bring up your children to be healthy, to be happy, to be playful, all of that, how to bring them up in this responsive way. And because if you don't do that, the cycle of low ability, low enrollments, etc. will continue later on. Finally, this entire group of infants and outer school youth need very special attention if you are interested in the Muslim in improving the status and well-being and development of Muslim communities. Now, because this whole birth to 6 years, incidentally, is extremely important if we want to implement the 12 years of school education, because that birth to 6 years is the foundation for better schooling, better colleges, better enrollment in schools and colleges. So I'll finish. The remaining part of my talk will now focus on what we can learn, what Muslims can learn from the experience of Muslims in colonial India, and what Muslims can learn from the experience of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in post-independent India. Next. Are we on that colonial slide? If you look at colonial India, the fundamental you will get from this what should be the fundamental requirements. When we think that Muslims are in a very bad position educationally right now, they were in an extremely poor position in the beginning decades of the 19th century, because Muslims did not take on to education, Western education, the way Hindus did, for instance. And it was only by 1882, the first Indian Education Commission, known as the Hunter Commission, that this situation started to be rectified, and colonial administrators started paying attention to Muslims, in fact, favored Muslims, and in every report colonial report on education that you will get, Muslims had a separate chapter called the Education of Mohammedans. There was a separate section devoted to the education of Mohammedans. Now, that separate section tracked the progress of Muslims because data was available on Muslims. So you knew that if you were in the 1920s, Muslims knew that they were in a better position than they were in 1890s and later on, because they were able to see the differences in enrollment, because there was data to show this. So you were able to monitor and evaluate the progress. As important, and this is very important, Syed Ahmad Khan started the Muslim All India Mohammedan Education Conference. And from 1886, I think, till the present, till 1947, not present, 1947, this Mohammedan Education Conference held meetings almost every year in different parts of India to discuss specifically education problems of Muslims. That was a regular meeting, so that Muslim educational problems were highlighted on a regular basis. So that what you have over here is a policy favoring Muslims, data which tracked Muslim education progress, and third, continuous discussions by Muslims about Muslims, education of Muslims. So you had these three things which ensured that in the 1930s, if you read the education reports, Muslims were in a far better position than they were before. However, they were not quite at the same level as Hindus there even then, but in a very, I would say, in a fairly good position in comparison to what their population was at that time. And I am talking mainly school education and higher education. What they were far superior was to schedule, in the 1930s and 40s, were to scheduled caste students and especially scheduled tribe students. Scheduled tribe students, there were hardly a few hundred maybe altogether in school, or maybe a little more, and hardly a few hundred in higher education. They were almost non-existent in the educational system, tribal students. Next. What can we learn from the experience of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in post-independence India? Starting from almost zero before independence, with independence came reservation. But it was, see, the important point to understand about scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, it's not just simple that they got reservation, but is that the government had very special education schemes which focused on scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. Scheduled castes and scheduled, they focused on this, and for instance, some of you may be old enough to remember the District Primary Education Project, DPP, or Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA. In both projects, very special efforts were made to enroll scheduled caste children, scheduled tribe children, and everybody was, administrators and everybody were expected to have schemes which showed that there was distinct improvements in their enrollment. And this is only one of the many schemes that favored this thing. But as importantly as schemes, these schemes cannot be formulated without data. Very early on, in the 1960s, for instance, there was data had started being given for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes data. And so all progress of scheduled castes were monitored fairly regularly on the basis of that. And institutions around India did a lot of studies on the education of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. I remember when I was teaching at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in 1976, Tata Institute and a few other institutions were in a national study on scheduled caste and scheduled tribe students in schools and colleges of India. A very large-scale study was being conducted by Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So you had data and you had studies done to track the progress of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. And so that at the end of, by about 10 years ago, they had already overtaken Muslims, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and this was because of a combination, as like for Muslims in colonial India, government policy favoring them, data which was able to conceptualize, formulate schemes for them, monitor the schemes, and evaluate the schemes. That is the importance of having numbers, data. Okay? And finally, they had regular discussions also around their position, etc. Now, contrast this with Muslims in post-independence India, and we must learn from what happened to Muslims. What happened to Muslims was immediately after independence, till I would say the Sachar Committee, Muslims were almost totally neglected. They were neglected in many ways, but one major area of neglect was there was no data available. So, there was a report before the Sachar Committee report called the Gopal Singh report, and the Gopal Singh report had to go around collecting data, and I think Sachar also had to go around also collecting data for some of their findings. So until Sachar Committee came in 2006, the report, there was almost no data available, census or any other data. It was only after that that the data started coming on Muslims, and that too extremely limited data. So what happened was that suddenly after 2007, there has been an invisible decline in the last 4 or 5 decades from 1947, where Muslims have declined in terms of other communities in their enrollment in school and higher education. And this is what I call it, that invisible decline. And suddenly, they haven't yet woken up to it, that they are now far lower than even scheduled castes and scheduled tribes right now. So what has happened is, with the no government policy in favor, in fact neglecting them. Second, no data to track their progress, to make up schemes for them.
Some reports suggest that they are better than the SPNA.
No. I mean, whoever is saying that simply has not read the data, the reports. You read the UDICE report, the All India Survey of Higher Education. You read the National Sample Survey. I mean, whoever it is, ask them to see me, and I'll provide them all the official data. This is not data I'm cooking up on the spot. Okay, this is official data which is coming out from the government. So what you have. So what has been an important thing is that it's not that there have been no discussions on Muslim education. If you take track, and I've listened, this is not like me, but I've read scholars on this. The main discussion in Muslims for many decades was on 2 or 3 areas. One was on madrasa and madrasa reform. One was on Urdu medium and improving Urdu medium. And third was the education of girls. Now, all 3 issues are extremely important. But a lot of these discussions were simply polemical, what in English would be called polemical discussions, for, against, or that kind of discussions, not based on data-driven discussions. The scheduled caste, scheduled tribe discussions before independence were at one level driven by data, because there was data available. These discussions were on these issues, and nobody discussed the issue of how do you educate, what do you do for poor and lower middle class? It was simply assumed that they would be going to Urdu medium schools, or they would be going to madrasas. That was the understanding, and that would take care of their educational requirements. Finally, the important thing also to realize is right now there is some data available for Muslims. But even now, the data available by MHRD, NCRT, UGC is extremely limited for Muslims. They provide data. If you read the same report, you will get 10 times more tables on scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in each of these reports, because they will report on all kinds of things about scheduled castes, how they did in examinations, etc. Navodaya Vidyalayas do not publish any report on, Kendriya Vidyalayas do not publish reports on Muslims. All right. NCRT has a learning survey which has been doing for about 2 decades, periodic surveys. They provide state level data on scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and recently on OBC, but not Muslims. And I know for a fact that perhaps all the Muslim data is available for these people, especially the data collected on schools, because that is data which is national and where they ask questions on religion. So that data needs to be there. So the combination for Muslims, and that is why they are where they are, is the combination of government neglect, lack of data, lack of proper discussions on the situation of Muslims, and so there's been an invisible decline of Muslims from where they were right now, and they are right now at the bottom. So what are the 2 critical recommendations that I have, all right, to be taken forward? And this can be for discussion. This is my own. The first is that all data that is currently available for Muslims in the official documents should be published and made available for the public. And all data that is available for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes should be available for Muslims also, and in education. I would say that the same thing applies for almost any other profession, okay, that the data is also absent in various other fields, not only education, but I am focusing on education. The second is that there needs to be periodic discussions on the status and the state of Muslim education. Right now, what is happening is every now and then there's a conference or there's a discussion, but nothing goes beyond that. And I am particularly struck, all right, that 2 major things happen. One is the abolition of the Maulana Azad scholarships, and the second is the lack of mention of Muslims in the 2020 education policy, both of which I think are very important events. But apart from a few stray voices immediately after, there's been no follow-up. And the no follow-up is because there is a lack of any institutional base for discussion, and there's a lack of an institutional base to hold these discussions periodically. So how can this be done? And we must remember that when we talk of Muslims, I am now only talking of disadvantaged Muslims, but the situation of Muslims in Kerala is very different from Muslims in UP. And so all these discussions can only be held, and within Maharashtra, the situation of Muslims in Western Maharashtra is very different from Muslims in Marathwada. All right? I mean, this is true of not only Muslims, but it's true of any other group. So discussions have to be both at central level, at state level, and at local district level. Because that is, and please remember, the most important decisions, whether it's for Muslims or any other group, is taken at the local level, that is municipal corporation, Zilla Parished level, and at state level. There are some decisions which are important at the center, like data for country, etc., national education policy. But important implementation decisions are made at the state and local level. So that is where you need to really focus everything. So, last slide. Next. Can we implement these 12 years? No, so the slide before. So if we want to make any difference to implement these 12 years of education for Muslims, and if you want to make any difference to them, then there are some issues that have to be addressed, and I will not be able to address them now because there's no time. The issue would be one of, can we provide 12 years of quality education in municipal corporation schools, in Zilla Parishad schools? Can these be done in low cost? Can 12 years of good quality education for disadvantaged Muslim students be can you implement them in low cost English medium schools? Can you implement that in Urdu medium schools? And can you implement 12 years of education in madrasas? I am not going to answer this question, but I will leave it to you to answer this question. But I would like to leave this with two issues which I think are important. In dealing with all these issues and the goal of providing 12 years of quality education for disadvantaged students, we have to think of what is the role of Muslim organizations in this endeavor. And we must remember that the biggest, most important player who can make a difference is government. All right? It is only government which has the scale to deal with populations of the size of Australia, South Africa, etc. So you cannot simply say government neglects Muslims. What is the role of organizations, Muslim organizations, is they have to put pressure, advocacy, deal with it strategically and politically as best as you can, because not every state government is anti-Muslim. There are state governments which are extremely favorable to Muslims, all right, and some are fairly neutral. But even if they are favorable, let me tell you that the decline of Muslims started in Congress during the Congress rule. It did not start with the BJP. The decline was even more precipitous with the BJP. But it started with Congress. So do not wait for a better political dispensation. You have to work where the situation right now, and that means your role has to change, not simply a matter of giving charity or zakat or anything like that. You have to be able to organize and organize strategically with other disadvantaged partners, other civil society members. You have to operate strategic, because they are also interested as a good citizens in the welfare of Muslims. Okay, so there are all kinds of possibilities in this kind of strategic partnerships, and to think politically always when you are talking about disadvantaged thing. So this becomes critical in your thinking. And the next is Muslim organizations, when you're dealing with disadvantaged communities, must also think of what will you do in Muslim communities, because all disadvantaged Muslim children, young or old, require inputs in their communities, whether you call it remedial classes, whether you call it English classes, coaching classes, academic counseling, career counseling, whatever you do, that is almost a must in the communities that they work in. And I'm happy now to answer any questions you have. And next slide. And incidentally, if you want to know the details more on what needs to be done, look at I have written a report, which I always forget, lifting Muslims from the bottom of the development education ladder, a significant new agenda for the 21st century. It's an online report under my name, and the website I've given there. And you can look at my, and if anybody wants to correspond with me, I've given my email address. Thank you. Actually, I could have done, I put this up for people who may not have been able to follow me speaking, but were able to read more or less. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Because I have very definite, incidentally, I have not told you, I have very definite views on English medium, Urdu medium, madrasas. I have very definite views on this, but I didn't have the time to answer it, and I have many other issues. Maybe I have many other issues on the questions of social and cultural capital that disadvantaged Muslims require. All right, as in addition to regular capital, which I did not touch upon, but because it requires a longer discussion, and I didn't do that.
We are eager to hear you on Urdu medium schools. Your views on Urdu medium.
You know, I'm glad to give you my views on Urdu medium schools, because I have taken almost my entire understanding of Urdu medium schools has been taken by a gentleman who is sitting in the front row. Okay? Is he here? No, here. Professor Shaban, who has written extensively on Urdu medium schools, okay? And in Maharashtra, and I've taken my cues from him and the other data which is available on National Sample Survey. See, I have no problem with Urdu medium, English medium. The English term is, I'm agnostic as far as that is concerned. I have no problem understanding that Urdu is an important language for Muslims, okay? And I think it should be taught, but not as a medium of instruction. Because as a medium of instruction, it is a language to nowhere, except becoming an Urdu teacher, and maybe joining a madrasa or something like this. They started in Kerala, started saying, if you learn Urdu, you can go to the Middle East and teach Urdu there. Chalo, that is the aspiring, what you can aspire to. The problem with Urdu medium schools is there are hardly any complete Urdu medium schools. They are all primary level or primary and middle school level. So, with all the best of intentions, your Urdu medium parents in Urdu medium are thinking we should send their children to an Urdu medium school. But after primary, where's the middle school? After middle school, where's the high school? even in Pune, it's a city, how many full Urdu medium schools are there for all the medium things? The other problem is that actually Urdu is the medium, is the language spoken at home, and I did the calculation, for only about 12% or 15% of Muslims. All right? So when you say this is the language of Muslims, I must also ask you, which Muslims are you talking about? You're talking about some Muslims in very often in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, some in Maharashtra, some in Karnataka, but in some states they hardly exist. Okay? I mean, so it's not, and Urdu. Most Muslims speak Marathi, Hindi, Bengali, Malayalam, Kannada, the Punjabi, whatever is the language in the thing. Okay? That is the language they speak. The other interesting issue is there's work in the National Sample Survey which shows that if you look at where do parents who speak any Indian language, which type of school do they go to? And Urdu medium parents who speak Urdu at home, all right, are the least likely to send their parents to Urdu medium schools. They send them to all other especially, and they favor English medium the most. Okay? And I agree with you entirely that Urdu has been now for decades the medium of instruction for the poor and lower middle class. No middle class parent sends their child to full-time Urdu medium schools, and even the Urdu medium schools, their managing committees do not send their children to the Urdu medium schools, they send their children to English medium schools. This is the height of hypocrisy, as far as I am concerned, that if you promote Urdu medium as a thing, that you send your children to an English medium school. So now you've understood why, and my principal objection there is you cannot, I think all disadvantaged students, especially Muslims, need to get 12 years of quality education, and that cannot be provided structurally by Urdu medium schools because they simply do not have the capacity. Neither, should I say, Urdu medium teachers, very often in training programs, they are normally not even invited, or they don't come because the medium of training is not Urdu, because I have attended hazard training programs, all right, organized state level, and you do hardly ever see Urdu medium teachers coming for this. And so they are not even keeping, I don't blame them, they're not keeping abreast of what contemporary technology, contemporary issues, etc. And so I don't see the way out. However, I think there is a very important role to promote Urdu. And that requires a different strategy altogether, and not make children take up Urdu. And if I was an Urdu medium student, I would curse my parents for sending me to an Urdu medium school, because after completing the school, I wouldn't even know where to go. What do you do with it? This is true of madrasa education too. Let me be very clear. I have gone through a religious education myself, and I have no problem if Muslims want to send their children for religious education. However, I think that should be kept separate from full-time education for Muslim children. So please send your children to madrasa education, but it should be done. I think that is what happens in Kerala. All right? They send their children to almost a full-time school, and this is what middle-class Muslims do. Middle-class Muslims arrange for the Maulvi to come home, and they get their instruction in the Quran and all of that. My friends' children get their instruction in the Quran at home. So they are able to make the best of both worlds. There's a very good saying in the Bible. It says, when Christ was being tempted, there was a coin which showed the Roman emperor on one side and something else on the temple on the other. So they said, which side are you on? The temple or the Roman emperor? So Christ knew that they were trying to trick him, because if they said the temple, then they say, see, he's disloyal to the Romans, because the Romans were controlling Israel at that time. But if you say the temple, then they say he's not a Jew. See, he is not a Jew. So he said, neither thou shalt serve God and mammon, which means thou should serve God and mankind. So you do both.
Sir, for Marathi medium also, up to the schooling there is a Marathi medium, but for the higher education, especially for the professional education, engineering, medical, architecture, pharmacy, always there is a English medium. But Marathi medium students are not finding it difficult.
Hello.
आप बैठ जाइए सर, आप बैठ जाइए.
I can stand better.
हाँ, that is your better.
I thought I was loud enough, but still, you can stand. So, actually that's a very good question. In 2000, I had written an article in the Times of India called The English Juggernaut. The juggernaut is I don't know whether in World War II, that was the German tanks, which came, known as a juggernaut, which came and completely broke through any defense, the French defense line. And that whole thing was known as the juggernaut. And the word comes from Jagannath. Because if you know the Puri temple idol, when that thing starts, nothing can stop it. Nothing can stop it comes from the word Jagannath, comes from Jagannath. Nothing can stop it, and a lot of people die under the idol. Okay? So I wrote in 2000 an article called The English Juggernaut, Regional Medium Schools in Crisis. Okay? And I said that unless you teach English extremely well in regional medium schools, Marathi medium, Hindi medium, Kannada, whatever, Bengali, okay? Unless you teach English extremely well, your schools will collapse. And that is what happened to a lot of regional medium schools. Bombay, for instance, has no Gujarati medium left. A lot of the Marathi medium schools all over have turned over to English. And this has happened in Anjuman. A lot of the Urdu sections have become English sections. So this is happening all over. So the point, the issue is that you take the example of what happened to a previous generation of Indians who were educated in the mother tongue, but also learned English extremely well. Okay? So you need to teach English extremely well, and that is why at our center we made a major push to teach English in municipal schools, Zilla Parished schools, and that is why we had a radio program called Ami Ingreji Shikto, We Learn English. It was a bilingual program in Marathi English. There's a Hindi English version called Aao Angrezi Padhe, all right? And we were able to teach, because it was bilingual, and Marathi English, because the dialogue was mainly in Marathi, and then slowly became English later on in the third year, that rural children understood and were able to speak, let me say, not fluently, but quite well at the end of 3 years. And that you need to, and that's just only a drop in the bucket. You need to absolutely make sure that children are fluent in mother tongue and children are fluent in English. And I must tell you that this 2020 National Education Policy is extremely right when it comes to its emphasis on mother tongue and regional language, but is extremely wrong when it attacks English. All right, if you read the whole policy, it's a determined attack on English as a foreign language, as a language of the colonial language, oppressor language, and there's much more emphasis has been given to Sanskrit, as if Sanskrit will now be the new English in India.
Professor?
Sorry, I'll take your place.
Maharashtra government has taken decision and implemented. from first onward, first standard, English is taught in Marathi medium.
Yes, yes.
Don't fight.
All medium schools. English is from
सब
first
मीडियम में
standard.
अभी इंग्लिश पहले से
नहीं,
फर्स्ट
see.
स्टैंड से शुरू हो गई
But it is not being taught
अभी
very well.
स्कूलों के
No, no,
अंदर
I see. I agree. I know this because I objected to it long time ago, but now I have come to terms with that. This is a political decision. It is not a pedagogical decision. Alright? Simply because young children can speak 2 or 3 languages. They are able to speak 2 or 3 languages, but they are unable to read and write 2 or 3 languages. That is, speaking a language because you hear it in the community, 1 or 2 phrases here and there with your friends, with your home, is different from reading and writing. And please don't use your example. I learned it. I learned to read and write. I learned reading and writing very early, long before class 1. Okay, but then I was in a different situation. But this is not true of poor and lower middle class children or Muslims. You have to teach Marathi. You have to teach Marathi well. If you want to teach them English, you have to teach them well. The whole issue is teaching properly and appropriately. And significantly, you must invest in teachers' own English. If teachers cannot speak English, they will not conduct the class in English. And if it cannot conduct the class in English, children will not read in English, write in English, or speak in English. They will say good morning, good afternoon, sir, madam, yeah, bo. You know what I mean? They will say, they will count 1 to 100 immediately, but ask them to say anything beyond 2 sentences. Let me explain this because we in our center have done extensive studies of what children are learning by way of English and Marathi in schools. So I'm not speaking off the top of my head, alright? This is actually, I can share with you what the research done on the English of rural children in Maharashtra, even 9th and 10th standard. Sir.
प्रोफेसर हम लोगों ने पिछले जन्म में कुछ अच्छे काम किए होंगे कि आप जैसा लेक्चर सुनने को मिला। सच बता रहा हूँ मैं आपको, इतना illuminating, इतना provoking, factual based, research based, thank you प्रोफेसर। और just would like to know your reaction to 2 things कि when Muslims decided not to go for education, उसका एक बहुत important reason था their participation in anti-colonial struggle. They rejected English because the English was 1857 में जो अंग्रेजों ने किया था, हम उसको नहीं करेंगे। मैं उसका एक छोटा सा आपको उदाहरण देता हूँ। ये मेमोयर में लिखा है शहीद अशफाकुल्लाह ने कि हमारे घर में अशफाकुल्लाह का परिवार बहुत दलाल परिवार था अंग्रेजों का। तो उनके यहाँ कोई एक मेहमान आया, लेकिन माँ जो थी she was anti British। तो उनका कोई दोस्त एक अंग्रेजी का किताब छोड़कर चला गया। तो उनकी माँ ने नौकर से कहा कि इसको चिमटे से उठाकर इसको बाहर कूड़ेदान में डालकर आओ, मतलब हाथ से भी मत उठाना अंग्रेजी का किताब जो है। तो वो that was not anti knowledge or anti education, that was that we could not do anything but we reject your language, so that may be wrong। अच्छा, secondly I want to know your reaction। सर सैयद जिसको मुसलमानों का रिनाई साहब का हम बोलते हैं, एक तो उसको सर भी बोलते हैं और मुसलमानों का रिनाई साहब भी है, ठीक है चलो हो गया। क्या हम लोग जानते हैं कि वो पागलों की हद तक औरत की एजुकेशन के खिलाफ थे? उनका दोस्त सलामत, जो उनका दोस्त था 4 दोस्तों में से, उसने उनसे एग्री किया और लखनऊ में जाकर सलामत गर्ल्स स्कूल बनाया। उनको 4 लोग कंधा देने के लिए नहीं मिले थे मरने पर। तो ये सारा जो सो कॉल्ड मुसलमान और हम इस्लामिक सोसाइटी जो है, जो सर सैयद हमारा बाप है या हमारे गुरु हैं, कि उन्होंने सारा औरत को पीछे रखने में, पढ़ाई को पीछे रखने के अंदर कितना बड़ा रोल अदा किया है उन्होंने। अंग्रेजों की जो दलाली की वो तो अलग बात है।
सर बात ऐसी नहीं है, बात यानी मैं उर्दू मीडियम के फेवर में ऐसा बात कर रही हूँ, ऐसा नहीं है। मैं खुद उर्दू मीडियम से पढ़ी हुई, लेकिन 1968 के अंदर पूना शहर में, जो कि बड़ा महाराष्ट्र का एजुकेशन का ये माना जाता है सबसे बड़ा आज, तो यहाँ पर बहुत कम स्कूलें थी। उर्दू मीडियम के हिसाब से एंग्लो उर्दू में एक स्कूल थी, और यहाँ से आपको बता रही खड़की जो है एमिनेशन फैक्ट्री, वहाँ के जो बच्चे हैं वो आ नहीं पाते थे, उनमें से मैं भी एक थी। तो हम 8 लड़कियाँ ट्रेन से, बस से और पैदल चल के गोलीबार मैदान में आते थे, और फिर वहाँ पर यानी हमको एजुकेशन के लिए, मतलब एजुकेशन इतना मुश्किल था। आज जैसी सहूलतें हैं, आज जैसी गवर्नमेंट दे रही है, आज जैसा आप बोल रहे हैं, सुनने को जो मिल रहा है, उस वक्त के माँ बाप को नहीं मिलता था। एजुकेशन सिर्फ इसलिए कि पढ़ना है, पढ़ाना है, टीचर बोलते थे कि स्कूल में आओ तो पढ़ने के लिए। आज जैसी ये नहीं, लेकिन वो एजुकेशन बहुत बेहतरीन था, बहुत अच्छे टीचर्स थे, स्कूल्स बहुत अच्छे थे, लेकिन आने जाने के जो रास्ते थे वो बहुत दुश्वार थे, मुश्किल थे। पैसा नहीं था लोगों के पास, एजुकेशन के बारे में नहीं। और जब मैं खुद यानी एजुकेशन के अंदर जब मैं एज ए टीचर बनकर आई और मैंने जब पढ़ाई शुरू की, तो मुझे आपको बताते हुए यानी बहुत ये नहीं हो रहा है फ़ख्र, लेकिन एंग्लो उर्दू की मैं पूना महाराष्ट्र में फर्स्ट नंबर से आई हुई स्टूडेंट। तो उस बेस पे मुझे नौकरी मिली टीचर की, एज ए टीचर। मेरे पास कोई क्वालिफिकेशन नहीं था, मैंने डीएड, बीए, बीएड, एमए, एमएड सब प्राइवेटली किए। कहने का मकसद ये है कि जब टीचर यानी पढ़ाते हैं स्कूल में, और मैं खुद जब मैंने टीचिंग के अंदर आई, तो आपको बता रही कि जो माँ बाप है हमारे उर्दू मतलब मुस्लिम उर्दू जानने वाले, तो वो उर्दू ही नहीं बोलते, उनकी ज़बानें अलग अलग किस्म की है। जब मैं टीचर बनी तो मैंने देखी कि कोई माँ बाप कैसी ज़बान बोलता है, कुछ उनकी सही हिंदी या सही उर्दू या सही इंग्लिश तो बात ही नहीं। तो जब वो स्कूल में जाते हैं बच्चे, आज के ज़माने में, मैं वो पुराना छोड़ के आज के तरफ आ रही, आज जब हम इंग्लिश हमारे कॉरपोरेशन ने और गवर्नमेंट ने इंग्लिश स्कूल एक खोली हुई है, तो उसमें जब जा रहे, पर माँ बाप को इंग्लिश कहाँ आती है? माँ बाप को नहीं आती, और उनको नहीं आती तो वो पढ़ नहीं पाते। तो कहने का मकसद ये है कि उर्दू मीडियम से जब बच्चा पढ़ता है तो उसको हिंदी, मराठी, इंग्लिश, उर्दू और पर्शियन, अब वो पर्शियन ख़त्म हो गई यानी फ़ारसी, और संस्कृत आई। कहने का मकसद ये है कि माशरे में जो चेंजिंग्स है वो हमको देखने मिल रहे। हम मतलब पहरावे से अपनी शख्सियत को हमने थोड़ा सा अच्छा बेहतर बनाया, लेकिन एजुकेशन में हम इसलिए पीछे रह गए कि वो हम में ये नहीं रही। और आज गवर्नमेंट ने जो सहूलतें दी है, क्या राशन बांटो, चावल बांटो, खाना दो, इस सब से क्या हो गया, एजुकेशन का जो दर्जा है वो बहुत नीचे आ गया, वो सिर्फ उसके मायने रह गया। मैं ये कहना चाह रही हूँ।
I want to defend the government, okay? I normally don't defend the government, but sir, see, when we compare what is happening now with, say, what was happening 4 decades ago, 5 decades ago, and you compare yourself with what is happening now, I know that I think I went to schools which had very small numbers, or all middle class. All right, teachers were very good, all of that, dedicated, everything. But as we belong to a very small proportion of the population of India. All right, we belong to middle and this thing. So those were the people who were being educated before. What the government has done, but not extremely well, this is what is known as democratization of education. That is, education has been made available to many more people. Now, in the process, what has not been done is that the quality of teaching should have gone up, because these children require not only good teachers, but they require a different type of teaching. See, the type of teaching that was good for you, if there's a problem, see, in middle class families, what is the situation? If there's any problem with the teaching at school, middle class parents help their children at home, okay, maths, whatever, or they get a tutor to do it. Where is that happening for poor children in ZP schools or municipal schools? The parents do not, if they are teaching English, they don't know English. If they are teaching reading and writing or mathematics, they don't know how to help their children. So, which is very different from middle class. So we are in a different period, अलग ज़माना में है, जिसमें teachers के लिए training भी अलग होनी चाहिए on how to deal with poor children, which is very different from middle class children.
येस, मी इथे सरांचं जे आत्ताचं जी सगळी माहिती सरांनी दिली आणि मला असं वाटतं आपल्या सगळ्यांना या आत्ताच्या या सरांच्या सेशनचा फार उपयोग झाला. आणि त्यातलं सगळ्यात महत्त्वाचं सार जे मी त्यातनं काढलं ते हे होतं की आपल्याला गव्हर्मेंट पॉलिसी हवी, आपल्याला डेटा तयार करायला हवा, त्याचं मॉनिटरिंग करायला हवं आणि स्कीम इव्हॅल्युएट करायला हवी, त्याबद्दलची डिस्कशन्स व्हायला हवीत. आणि त्याचा एक भाग म्हणून आपण हे सुरू केलं. खरं म्हणजे तर पुढच्या काळामध्ये सगळ्यांना यावर कसं काम करता येईल हे पाहायला पाहिजे.